This next episode started with intentions of discussing an educational versus medical autism diagnosis, and it quickly evolved into two moms simply sharing and connecting. As mothers, it is so helpful to find your tribe who understands you and your journey. In all my 18 years working with families with a loved one with autism, it wasn't until my 2-year-old started speech therapy this last year that I started to see how difficult the path and journey is to understanding and accepting a diagnosis. Despite my clinical toolbox, I had to get out of my own way and figure out how to best support my son. It was during this time I learned that as parents, we have to give ourselves grace for not knowing what we didn't know, and now that we know better, we need to do better. Hello, welcome to the Let's Talk About Autism in Monglish podcast. On today's episode, I have a special guest who was willing to reach out to me last fall when I put kind of a APB, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for guests, who want to share their story, because that's what this is all about, right? Storytelling, impactful storytelling. Part of the whole point of this podcast is I wanted to normalize conversations in Monglish about autism because, I said it before, I think that the more we share the stories, I hope that more parents will realize that your experience, you're not alone in this. There are other families going through similar things, or maybe they have kind of gone through it and are experiencing teenagers with autism, because a lot of the parents that we hear from are the parents of younger kiddos. But I think a lot of the families that I have spoken to, almost everyone will say, we just felt so alone. And so definitely thankful for all the listeners and for the Hmong friends out there who are like, you know what, I want to share my story so that uh, it could probably possibly help them, but also help someone else. So today I'd like to welcome to the show Gali Her. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Tia, for having me.
Yes. So, Gully, please share with me about how autism has impacted you and your family. I'd love to learn more about your kiddo and just aspects of your journey that you like to share with the listeners.
Yeah, so autism is something that I only became familiar with in being an educator. I still remember the very first time I learned about it, which was in my psychology 1001
Mm-hmm.
class at the University of Minnesota. Just taking it because I need it for my general education credits, right? No, not just the general classes that I need to take in order to graduate. And I still remember the very first time I learned what autism meant, and that there were some autistic people who had enough intervention that actually became learned how to socialize like neurotypical people, that people can't even tell anymore that
Right.
they are neurodiverse. And so just always remembering that, and then having my son, who I've just noticed that his attention wasn't always there as an infant. And I've helped raise my younger siblings and my nieces and nephew, and I could just tell. And I'm glad that I was able to re-verify that when I had my second child, um, who, the way that she was raised, I was like, or the way she was growing, I was just like, yep, it felt like how it did the other babies that I've had around my life. But my son, everything that he did, I just questioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband he wasn't in denial, but he was very much so, let's just wait it out. Let's just wait it
Mm-hmm.
out. And so that was hard for me because I'm like, I need affirmation. Like, I need affirmation. And I still remember that we worked so hard at trying to get my son to just smile at us,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I still remember with my daughter at 2 months, she was already
Mm-hmm.
smiling at me, right? She
Yeah.
was always like, every time I talked to her, she was already smiling. But my son, no.
Yeah.
We worked so hard, we pick-a-booed so hard,
Uh-huh.
and it wasn't until 4 months that he became more like, oh, like they're trying to get my attention. And so I still remember when we were first able to
Mm-hmm.
get him to laugh a little more, and that was closer to 4 months. And so my husband and I did start a little bit on different pages. I was more hyper aware of it, like just
Mhm.
constantly like, do you see this? Like he's like this, he's like that. And I was also like connecting with a lot of different moms who had kids around the same age as mine. Like, I'm like, my child's doing this, my child's doing that. Is yours? Like constantly
Yeah.
asking to like get affirmation that maybe my child's normal or maybe he's not, like
Mhm.
um and it's just like during that time it was tough because it's like I didn't want it to be autism, but I knew that it might be that. And so getting past that was probably the hardest part of
Yeah.
that journey. And my it wasn't until my husband and I finally learned to just accept it. And I think that we accepted it pretty fast, even before he got his proper medical diagnosis.
Mhm.
When like autism or not, we just knew that he was delayed and that
Mhm.
he wasn't socializing or that he
Right.
wasn't interacting or doing things the way that his neurotypical peers would. So we were like, you know what? Who cares? Like when I learned to let go of those expectations,
Mhm.
I felt the biggest weight off of my shoulders to finally meet him where he was at. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the biggest like barrier to get over
Mhm.
when you're processing all your emotions as a parent that my child might be autistic, and what does
Right.
that mean for me? And ever since we overcame that, like it has made this journey so much more easier.
Mhm.
We've learned to embrace it. We are doing everything we can at home. I'm like signing him up for everything. I mean,
Mhm.
granted, I'm the one who's managing all of it, and my
Yeah.
husband is definitely there to support. Like, if I need him to be the person who takes my son there, he will for the therapies, the drop off, pickups, wherever it is that we're doing. Like, this 4-year-old has so much going on in his life, but I foresee it as like, in the future, that's the same thing as my daughter joining like so many extracurriculars,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's just activities that we have going on for him.
Mhm.
Because, like neurotypical or neurodiverse, when they start joining sports clubs, actually, if we put them in music, if we put them in
Mhm.
whatever, we're
Mhm.
going to be running around town like parents or like every other family
Yeah.
trying to manage their kids' schedules, right?
Right.
So I see it as that. And it's still not an easy journey, but I think that being able to embrace it is something that what makes it easier. Um, and my, you did say you want to know more about my son.
Mhm.
Um, he he loves butterflies.
Oh.
So I remember listening to one of your episodes about the autism in Korean dramas.
Oh, yes.
And how one of those, I don't watch it, but I remember one of
Mhm.
them
Yeah.
was into butterflies, or
Yes.
there was a mention of a butterfly, but my
Mhm.
son loves butterflies. Like that was his
Yeah.
first word. Um, he kept saying fly, and like because
Uh-huh.
he had echolalia, and so he
Mhm.
would just say fly, 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 fly all
Yeah.
day.
Uh-huh.
I later learned that he was trying to say butterfly, and he
Yeah.
carries his little butterflies with him all day, every day.
Uh-huh.
He knows he can't take it to school because I don't want the risk of him losing it. But
Right.
he's got good grip. Like he does not lose it unless we're at
Yeah.
home. But then like he'll like let go of it for 2 seconds to go do something. But if he's taking it out in public, there's no doubt that he still has it in his hand the
Yeah.
entire. We have family photos, and he's holding on to it. I'm like,
Oh,
that's the
that's
only way I can get
precious.
him. Like if I take it away, I actually dysregulate him. So,
Yeah.
but he's a very happy child, very very happy, and just giggly and um super easygoing. Obviously, like every toddler will protest, if
Mhm.
he doesn't like something. But Luna.
Mhm.
So through the protesting, even if he doesn't want to do what I want him to do, he'll still do it.
Yeah.
So like in fact, like you would think that he's harder because he's autistic, but because he's so easygoing and he doesn't really know how to advocate for himself. He's actually easier to handle than my daughter, who has who's only 18 months, and she has
Oh,
the
yeah.
biggest, like, emotions and sass and opinion, and, like, I cannot get her to do what I want her to do. Like,
Yeah.
it's easier to work with my son because as silly as it sounds, he's more predictable,
Right, right.
than my daughter, you know? So,
Yeah.
we really, we get emotional, thinking about our son because given his condition, but we love him so much, and I've learned to accept
Yeah.
that if he's gonna be that way for the rest of his life, so be it, you know, with all the intervention we're doing. If he progresses and have strides and hopefully one day functionally communicates rather than scripting, it's
Yeah.
great. If he doesn't, and if he's gonna script the rest of his life, then we'll keep communicating with him through his scripting, you know?
Yeah. Scripting is a form of communication, right? It's
Mhm.
functional for him, right? And so
Yes.
I always say, we talk about like it's not our job to change how he does things.
Mhm.
It's our job
Yep.
to learn what he's trying to communicate in the way
Yeah.
that he's communicating, right? And that's, you asked me earlier about, uh, what I do. And I was saying, I've been in the field for 18 years, and that's what keeps me here is that it's for me, it's like all of those puzzle pieces, putting it together and going, how can I break in to what they're trying to teach us, right? Because
Yeah.
like,
We just got back from parent teacher conferences, and his teacher said that every time he says something, she'll take out her phone and Google
yeah.
the little sentence that he said in hopes that she
Yeah.
could pull up, is it from the book? Is it from a show? Is it,
Yeah.
and most likely it's from YouTube or a book.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, he would just sit there and script all day.
Yeah. I mean, he'll eventually have, like, a library of things, right? And you'll know, like, "Oh, 더 하리나, this is what he's trying to communicate," right? Or the new "Orina, new haila luna," or he says this phrase, this is what he's trying to communicate here, So it's like he
Mhm.
is communicating in his own way. It's up to
Yeah.
us to kinda, like, jump into his world and understand
And I
that.
think he's starting to learn that a little. Like, a lot of it is just him scripting. I know a lot of it is him scripting whatever's coming into his mind.
Okay.
Like, if it's in his head, like, and which is crazy because it's like a million things.
Yeah.
One, he would go from like one book to another to another to a YouTube
Uh-huh.
show to in like 5 minutes. It's all
Wow.
his scripting, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, it's like from five different things, and so sometimes I know he truly is just thinking out loud.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
He's just scrolling through all the things that he knows
yeah,
and
yeah,
enjoys. Yeah.
which is probably 80% of the time. But sometimes he will come and tell
Yeah.
us, like, you know, um, things that he wants us to like acknowledge him about. Or
Mhm.
lately he's been scripting, "It's my mommy. How are you? How was your day, mommy?" But he'll like ask me like
Uh-huh.
any time throughout the day. But I know I ask him that so much, and even if he
Mm.
might not necessarily know the true meaning of how was your day, because when I ask him,
Mhm.
he doesn't respond to me. But
Right.
he will ask me because I ask him so much, and so I would
Mhm.
just continually model to tell him, "Oh, my day was good. Thanks for asking, buddy."
Yeah.
Um, so like learning to communicate with him through his scripting. Like, I don't know what you're thinking of or what you're trying to say, but I will find a way to
Yeah.
respond to you as
Yeah.
if we are talking.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and making that meaningful, right? Have that meaningful
Mhm.
exchange, even if right now he is just scripting. Eventually, it'll click, and he'll realize,
Yes.
"Oh, okay." When I want to, and it's almost like he's checking in with you, right? Like
Yeah.
my daughter, she'll just randomly come up and kiss my hand, or she'll just randomly, not even looking at me, be like, "I love you, mommy." So it's like that, like he's
Yeah.
checking in with you, like, "Hey," like instead of being able to articulate and come up with the different words, he knows when he asks that it gets your attention, and that it
Mhm.
also means, hey, he's thinking about you, wants to check in with you. So,
Yeah.
right, again, it's just like, understanding like what is he trying to say in that moment without actually saying it, right? So it's a little bit of a puzzle right now, but I think
It
that's really
is.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you notice even as early as about 4 months that, hey, you guys are really trying really hard just to get an expression from him. And then at what age did you and your pediatrician decide, hey, we gotta dive deeper and see, run some assessments? I don't know if the MCHAT is usually a little bit later than 4 months for sure. Did you guys wait that long, or did you express your concerns to your pediatrician early on?
I did. Um, I am all about advocacy. I'm not afraid to share my expressions or
Awesome.
how I'm feeling. So at every well child
Mm-hmm.
visit, I expressed all of it. And I felt it wasn't until 12 months
Mm-hmm.
because, like my husband, the pediatrician was just like, well, we can't really tell
Right.
truly if he is delayed or like, because, from age 0 to 12 months, like, most infants are spacey into their own
Right.
world, and but I just have that mother gut
Yep.
instinct, like, no, something is different about this
Uh-huh.
one than all the babies I've interacted with, right?
Yeah.
And I I think that waiting until 12 months was really long for me because, like I
Right.
told you, I was constantly seeking for affirmation,
Yeah.
even from my husband, from like, you guys see this? Like, he's a little
Mhm.
delayed, right? Like, he's a little different.
Mhm.
Do you see? And people would just be like, oh, just give it time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I want to give it time, but I just need, like, seeking for that affirmation was so hard for me because I felt like I was not getting affirmed anywhere because
Right.
people were like, oh, all babies do that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I know they do, but there was always that. And so, um, what is it? Finally, at 12 months, the concerns that I kept bringing up my doctor was like, um, since you brought it up so much, Gauli, like, we'll finally um put in an evaluation for him for the Help Me Grow program.
Okay.
So we will start there because we don't know if it's autism or not. And
Right.
so Help Me Grow does not necessarily require a diagnosis of
Right.
anything. As long as
Mhm.
you're displaying signs of delay, then we will evaluate and go from there. And
Mhm.
so, in fact, even if I really, really, really wanted to find intervention programs for him, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't do anything about it until 18 months.
Okay.
So at 12 months, maybe it was 14 months, I forgot. Um, but between either 12 or 14 months,
Mhm.
um, they called me and they were like, "Ali, we're trying to schedule an evaluation for your son." But I was too overwhelmed, so I ignored it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I just completely ignored it. I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to accept
Mhm.
that maybe there is something going on with my son, and that because I knew that the moment I accepted that this is it, that there was going to be an overflowing of appointments and things that was going to
Yeah.
come with what it meant to be delayed and or autistic.
Right.
I knew that, but I wasn't mentally prepared. So I ignored it for a week, and I think it was 12 months or 14 months. And then when we went in for his 18 months checkup,
Mhm.
the concerns that I had for him were still the same. So the pediatrician said, "Did you get an evaluation for him?" And I was like,
Mhm.
"No, I didn't. I was too
Uh-huh.
scared."
Yeah.
Um, and she was like, "We need to do that again, and you're gonna do it this time." I'm
Mhm.
like, "Okay, I think I've had, like, the last few months to finally mentally process it. I think I'm
Yeah.
ready now." So they
Yeah.
called me and I picked up this time.
Uh-huh.
And it
Yeah.
was actually during 2021 when things were still so, um, COVID,
Yes.
Beijing, but like Mama roll out of COVID, right?
Right.
In
Yeah.
fact, in 2021, 有个疫情头 shut down 是
Mhm.
1年前 so we
Yes.
actually sent in videos of him
Oh, okay.
um, for the evaluation. So they
Yeah.
actually, and so they said that he was approved for
Mhm.
services,
Mhm.
and they started coming out. And in fact, during that time, I just my mother-in-law was living with me, and my mother-in-law was like, "Why are they coming out?" And I was like, "Oh, they're just teachers, since I'm a teacher, I just like to teach my child early." Like,
Mhm.
and my
Mhm.
mother-in-law was like, "Ê, cha, nu chuyện cho mẹ á xê là tua na." I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, là tua khen ng tao saw." Like, that's all I
Yeah.
said, right? Là tua
Yeah.
khen tao đâu nu saw. But she was like, "Why? Is it because nữ đùa?" I was like, "No, nữ chỉ đùa. Con chuyện nữa, nữ tôi nhìn đỡ thế. Nữ tôi bao nó, nữ chỉ đùa là tôi khen nữ saw." And so I
Mhm.
never told her the truth because I was nervous about what that meant, and I wasn't ready to tell my family.
Yeah.
And so they came out twice a month, and we really liked working with them because we were there with them,
Mhm.
and they would give us a bunch of different strategies. And
Yeah.
so instead of seeing it as intervention, we just saw it as parenting skills.
Yeah.
Like, we're like, "Oh my gosh, these are just things we should be doing with our kid anyway,
Right.
whether neurodiverse or not, you know?"
Yeah.
And so we worked really hard at some of those, and we saw the strides that he was making, and so that was the first step to um, the early intervention and the supports to help him grow through
Uh-huh.
some of his delays.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
if you don't mind if we kinda dive into the how you eventually explained it to your family. Did that conversation ever happen? Or are you guys still at the, just trying to see how things go before you really explain to them, like, this is what autism is. In fact, Nuchito, he's so smart, right? He knows his brain is thinking at like lightning speed more than all of ours, like, have you
Yeah.
gotten to that point yet with sharing that with your family?
With my parents, yes. I find that it's easier to sit down with my parents because they
Mhm.
will take me seriously and hear me out and not. And even if I know that they have questions,
Yeah.
they might not, to make me feel, to protect me so that I don't
Mhm.
feel judged.
Yeah.
My parents are really good about that.
Mhm.
My mother-in-law is for sure more of your typical, older Hmong woman who has a bunch
Mhm.
of questions, and like, right away when we have the teachers like, "Hey, you guys having them out here because you draw?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
when they say things like that, you become defensive,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
You tense up, and you're like, "No," right?
Yeah.
So we've actually never seriously sat down with her, but um, indirectly we just say, "Yeah, he has autism." That's it.
Mhm.
I just knew I had to rip a Band-Aid there.
Yeah.
And she also never asked because she did help raise him, between 0 to age 3.
Mhm.
So, she knows how he is, and
Yeah.
she's never questioned, actually, me how he was compared to the way that my mom did. Like, my mom did ask me every once in a while, like, "Nếu như, gusto mo 'to, 'no, nếu như kang siya ma," you know?
Mhm.
My mom would say things like that, but my
Yeah.
mother-in-law never said any of that, and so I think maybe when we indirectly just kinda, like, stated it, um, she probably was able to put 2 and 2 together, but we never actually sat
Yeah.
down with her. But with my parents, I did say, "Hey, mom. Hey, dad. I just wanna let you 2 know, you know, he he has, he's not sick. It's not a
Mhm.
disease."
Right.
Like, I don't want to say pneumo autism because
Right.
it's not really a mall, right?
Right.
It's he's born with it. It's called autism, and I don't need to explain um much of what it is. Just know that he's not considered stupid. Because
Mhm.
you two already know how he is. Like, yes, he doesn't really have the social skills compared to his cousins.
Mhm.
He prefers to hang out by himself. Like, you guys already know exactly how he is.
Mhm.
That's part of what autism is. That's all I said to them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to say more. Like,
Yeah.
and know that he has strengths that even some of his neurotypical cousins don't have, right? Like, he
Right.
loves reading. Like,
Yeah.
he was able to read so early on.
Wow.
Um,
That's
and
amazing.
I've learned that even kids around his age, like, the majority of them don't know how to read yet,
Yeah.
which is fine because it's something
Yeah.
that they begin to learn, grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, you know?
Mhm.
but, like, he can read.
Yeah.
And he can make up a word. He read the word certain the other day as curtain. So,
Oh.
like, like, so he has yeah, he makes it up, but he will phonetically
Mhm.
try to read it out, and so,
Right.
that's one of his biggest strengths, and so,
Yeah.
yeah.
But isn't that just like all of us, right? We have strengths and weaknesses, you know?
Yeah,
And so, I mean, I think that's really great that and also it's it's a conversation that it's a question that a lot everyone always asks. You know, they're like, "How do we say autism and mom? How do we explain it?" Okay, fine, we don't have an actual word, then how do we explain it? And that's where a lot of the information gets lost in translation, you know, because
mhm,
everyone defaults to "door," right? And it's like
yeah,
I feel like it's like my personal like agenda and goal to like eradicate that word from our vocabulary when we talk about
right,
developmental disability because it's like, you know, here's the thing is that they're functioning on such a different level than you and I. It's all it is. It's just different, right? It's not wrong. It's
yeah,
not words. It's not bad. It's just different. Therefore,
yeah,
neurodiverse, right? And so
yeah,
it's really hard. And I think you know, it just really depends on who it is that you're talking to and where they're at too, right? Talking about meeting people where they're at, you know, like if you can explain it in the best way that you know how, and they're just gonna still equate it to tuan. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know,
yeah,
and this can be someone that loves you, that loves your child,
yeah,
and that's just the extent of their understanding of that whole realm. And so I think it's really brave that you're like, you know what, I'm gonna attempt it, I'm gonna try, or you know what, just for self-preservation purposes, you're like, that's the extent of how far I'm willing to go to explain it because I have to reserve some of that energy for dealing with, you know, all the things I need to deal with, right? To help my
right,
child.
and
So it's
I've
hard.
learned that it also depends on how it's framed. Because before my mom left my mom was my parents were in Southeast Asia for a month,
Mhm.
and before my mom left, she said to me, she's like, "Okay, so Kuya Manga, mấy lúc của tụi mình nhỏ nó okay, sao cho trẻ của tụi mình đó, cho cả ta nữa,
Mhm.
sao canh hắn nữa, cho nó chỉ bảo chị, sao cho trẻ nữa hắn nữa." Because she sees how I talk to my son sometimes, like I don't yell at him, but sometimes I do talk to him, like any
Firmly.
normal person, yeah. And I'll be like, "Nope, you're gonna pick that up and you're gonna
Yeah.
throw it away because I'm asking you to." And I try to be firm about it. And my
Mhm.
mom would tell me, "Stop yelling at him. He doesn't know anything." So like it's really out of genuineness. Like,
Uh-huh.
and so in that regards, I didn't feel I wasn't offended by that because she's really
Yeah.
trying to remind me that, hey, he's really unaware. Like, give him grace, you
Right.
know? Um,
Which is
even,
funny because I don't know how your parents were, but my parents are typical traditional home parents, and they're the same way. Like it's somehow when they become grandparents, all of a sudden we're yelling at their grandkids. But I'm like, you yelled at me this way, and you didn't think that was right.
yes. Yeah, but she like I said, she said, "你做你去帮chị 擦chị钱呢," And so in
Yeah.
that regards, it's like, okay, I mean, I get it, I'm not gonna try to correct that. And so, but if they do it in a way where it's demeaning and it's disrespectful, I think I will correct it and I will use that
Sure.
opportunity to educate as needed.
Gully. I just saw this video recently. It's been floating around social media where this Hmong lady came back home with her daughter, right? Ni Takalotje and they were welcoming her back. Right? I guess she left her husband. And in the post, it was her sister's post, and she's like, and I read it and I was like, oh, like I just that word, it just is so, it's just so like distasteful to me, right? Because I'm like,
Right.
you could find a different word. Like, there's got to be a different compassionate word. But I feel like Hmong people have just defaulted to that word as a compassionate word, like right? Right? And so I have
Yeah.
had to like go, okay, stop it, reframe it. Are they calling her that, or are they just Lunu in that moment because they, maybe she didn't know what to do, and they're saying, we love you so much, and the Hmong people, we don't have a lot of words. We're limited, so that's it. That's
No.
the only one.
Yes, exactly. Because when you think about it, it's like it could be reframed as, "Oh, you oblivious child,"
Uh-huh.
or "You're naive."
Innocent.
Naive,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
naive. Yeah.
yeah, like, it's another word, isn't yeah, naive is another word for that, and yep,
Sure.
you're right, innocent, know nothing, you're aloof, you're space, like all of that. And so
Yeah.
that's really exactly like what you said. Oh, my, my oblivious sister or
Right.
naive, because a lot of us are naive.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully as our language, it's not going to grow, but when we talk about developmental disability, I hope that we can come up with different words.
Yeah.
Look at the options and come up with a different term that is more person centered, more
Yeah.
positive, more
You're right.
encouraging, because I think when we equate Dua to just a little bit of negativity, then that can, we talk about labeling, right? If you are going to label them, then there's this sense of dismissal too. Oh, no, Dua, just don't worry about them, Dua, baby, no, right? So I really hope that we can shift from that to like, I don't know what the other word would be.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
because like I said, we are so limited in the home words that we can use. I mean, there is no synonym, but I'm hoping that as we continue to have these conversations like you and I are having, we can have someone, message me and be like, Tia, here's a new word, here's a better word. There's gotta be, right? So you
I
said you're
agree.
you said that you're a teacher. So you said your son has a medical diagnosis of autism, and that will, essentially get him support as far as an IEP, and as he goes along his schooling. So even as a teacher, you know, we talk about parents who are hesitant to get their child diagnosed, to have that diagnosis so that they can continue to get extra supports in the classroom. In the classroom, I'm sure there are some kids where you're like, this kiddo needs support, but man, we can't do anything about it because there is no IEP, and or the parents are not willing to get diagnosis. Do you feel like kind of, like you said, it is monumental, that emotional shift that needs to happen? It can only happen on your time too, right? Like you said, it took you like a solid 4 to 6 months. 2, maybe 2 to 4 to 6 months to kinda be emotionally ready. So, for a parent who's not ready, but then they send their kids to school, and as a teacher, you're like, "They definitely could use support, but we can't do anything about it because there isn't a diagnosis on file to proceed with." Like, what is your, recommendation there, to those parents who are just kinda like, "They're fine. Teacher, did you had it, because, I think a lot of our parents are just like, teachers aren't complaining, and they're slowly progressing. They don't get in trouble, but then like they're not getting the full breadth of what they could be getting in terms of support. Like, how do you have those conversations, or what would you recommend to those parents who are on the fence about getting a diagnosis one way or another?
That's a huge question.
I know.
Yeah, it's a huge question because at the end of the day, you're right. The shift needs to be there within the parents in order for there to be like progression and for the surrounding community to be proactive
Yeah.
towards supporting this child, right? And my, funny that you asked that because there's been a mom on Facebook, and I don't think that it was from the Watao Facebook group
Okay.
because there's a few other Hmong mom groups. I think there's one just for Hmong mommies and advice,
Hmm.
and I think this mom had posted about their child being in speech,
Hmm.
and whether or not it was worth it. And I went on and advocated for that. Whether you think it's worth it or not, do it. Like,
Yeah.
um, do it, and you're not going to see changes right away. Um, but know that and trust that the professionals, like these are professionals, trained professionals. Like, and even if it looks like they're just playing with your child,
Yeah.
know that it's intentional playing that we are not doing with them.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
we didn't know that you could do something like that, like we,
Right.
especially coming from a Hmong background where we're still slowly learning what it looks like to actually be involved in our child's educational life versus the way our parents did it, which was just do your homework, right?
Hmm.
But they weren't active in it or like strategic in it, and they weren't aware, right? They didn't have the
Hmm.
education for that. And when that mom has been messaging me a lot, and she we talked a bit about why I believe that speech was beneficial for my son,
Mhm.
even if it felt like forever to finally see the benefits. And told her to just be patient. Eventually, her son, somebody did point out to her that your son is displaying um, autistic behaviors, and
Mhm.
she, I think she's in a space where she wasn't ready to hear that,
Yeah.
or she wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
And it's also challenging because she shared with me that her partner um, was like, no, we don't need services. So
Mhm.
even that's harder, right?
Yeah.
And so I took a moment to really reflect when she said to me, um, I just found out that my son might be autistic. I don't know what to do. I might not share with my family. I don't even
Mhm.
know. I don't know what to do. Like, you could just tell she just wants to hide from the world,
Yeah.
which is it's like, yeah, like, rightfully so, mom. Like, that's a very big thing to hear.
Mhm.
And so what did I say to her? Sorry, I'm like looking up my messages to her. I
Yeah.
really had to think about. I told her, I said, whether or not you are ready to accept that your son might be autistic,
Mhm.
um, like, the first thing is you need to understand what autism is.
Mhm.
Read into it, look into it, see if it resonates with you and the way that your child is. Okay. Um, Even if you don't want to accept it, like, what good is that going to do to your child? And then I also said the best way is to meet them where they are at, because if we
Mhm.
continue to put expectations on them, how is that beneficial for them? So at the end of the day, think about what is the most beneficial thing for your child right now?
Mhm.
And all that you're doing, do you truly believe that that is the most beneficial thing? And if you do, then, to each their own.
Right.
Unfortunately, but if you really sit back and think and actually do realize that, hey, my child does, like, exhibit some of these behaviors, and there's something I could do about it, right? Then, like, that's one thing to think about. In fact, the mom even said, I really pray that this is just a phase and
Mhm.
that he grows out of it. And I'm like, I hate to say it to you, but it's not a phase.
Right.
They're not going to grow out of it. But guess what? There is something you can do to support them to improve some of those that they are doing, some of those behaviors, some of those lacking skills that they have. That is in your control, and what supports that you're going to decide to do for them. And so that's, I can't, at the end of the day, like, we can't tell these parents like what they can and cannot do, but we can help point out, like, yeah, where do they resonate with some of these skills? And like I mentioned, like, are they lacking? And if they are, what are you going to do about that to support them?
Right. So going back to
Mhm.
when you said, hey, trust the professionals, right? They're the ones, this is their job. This is their 9 to 5, right? They're the ones that have the skills, the toolbox. And I was thinking about, I was sharing with you about my baby, right? My 22-month-old and his speech delay that we're kind of going through right now. And so I'm a BCBA. I write speech programs. I've been doing this for a while. And I was like, I should write programs for him. Of course, right? Your mommy instinct. You're like, well, how can I fix this, right? How can I help? What do I know? Look at my own toolbox as a mom and as a professional.
Yeah.
I can write all these programs, and I'm like going through all the things and I go, I can't. I'm not going to because I'm mom. That role to me is much more important than trying to intervene because you know what, who I'm going to look at to intervene? The speech pathologist. That's what they do. And so
Yeah.
then my job was to find, speech therapy for my baby. And I also knew that if I were to intervene in that way as a behavior analyst, it would diminish our relationship, right? And that relationship with my baby was much more important. I want him to look at me and see me as like that place, that safety net, right? That place of comfort, rather than that therapist who's doing drills with me, or holding me accountable to saying this or doing this. And so, I mean, it's really important to recognize our roles and going, okay, I'm the mom. It is my job to find the person to help my child with this. But also, like you said, like you have to answer the phone call. You gotta, as the adult, you have to go through with finding that person. And then, like like we were talking about, sometimes it just takes a while. Paperwork takes a while. It takes a lot of follow-ups and everything, but you have to just follow through. And I think a lot of people, fall off the wagon because it does take a while, right? But it's like you have to remember, one of my guests previously, she said something to me, and it was so haunting to me, Ellie, that it still like sticks to my mind right now. She said, relying on me. So just saying with my baby, like he knows nothing about going to get speech therapy. That's not his job. It's my job, right? That's I had him in my belly for 9 months. I delivered him into the world. It is my job to take care of that, to take care of him, make sure that he gets the best of everything, right? That's what all parents want for their children. And if we don't go out into to the world and procure that for our kiddo, no one else is going to. You have to, as the parent, be the one to initiate that whole process, right? So just a reminder for parents that, it takes a while. It is such a human emotion and human reaction to go, they'll just grow out of it, and then I hear a lot too, and I don't want to limit it to just our Hmong community. I think it's all communities where you just go, and I think it comes from a place of hope, right? That they'll get better, or they'll grow out of it, or they'll eventually learn. Hello, listeners. If you are hearing this ad, thank you so very much for taking the time to give my little podcast some love and attention. I hope that you will share your favorite episodes with your family and friends, and that they also do the same. I truly believe that there are Hmong families out there who don't know about the safe space I've created, where you can hear the stories of Hmong families and Hmong professionals talking about their experiences with autism. This podcast is produced by Thea Lee Consulting, LLC. I'm Thea, and I wanted to take a minute to invite you to check out another passion project of mine that was recently launched. I created an online course entitled The Lifespan of Parenting Your Child with Autism for any and all parents who have a child with a disability. The online course is spoken in Hmonglish with English subtitles so that all parents can access this information that I share about your 18-month-old all the way to old age. This course is designed to empower you to become your child's best advocate with me as your guide. As a bonus and special thank you for hearing this ad on the Let's Talk About Autism in Hmonglish podcast, go to tylconsulting.thinkific.com and enter the coupon code LTAAIH for 30% off. You can also find the link in the podcast profile page. Talk to you soon.
But yeah, you're right. Like growing up in this community, like we're all so worried about what people are gonna think about us.
Mm-hmm.
What are they gonna say? What are they gonna say? What are they gonna think?
Or what are they thinking? Much
And
less
even
what they're
even
saying.
I was conditioned. Like I worry about that still,
Mm-hmm.
But in being with my partner, I've learned to care less about that.
Right.
And
You
I've
have to.
learned it. I've learned in talking to some of these moms, like when that other mom said, "I'm not going to share with my family," and the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I said was, "In what ways? In what ways is that beneficial for your son?" That's all I said. Like I was like, you know what? If people look at my son weird, if people like, I'd be like, yes, he's autistic. I don't want autism to define who he is. At the same time, I'm not afraid to educate people and say
Mm-hmm.
he's autistic, and he is still who he is at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, autism or not. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but let me make it a little more clear for you that yes, he is autistic, so that's why he's behaving the way he is. Um, and I don't educate in a negative way. I educate like, hey, my son's autistic. Like you're all the, and it is what it is. Like my husband and I are not afraid to educate people, and we are learning to become more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It's not easy. It's something that we had to kind of practice,
Yeah.
and now our whole church knows, and we just say it. We just say it for what it is now. Like,
Yeah.
and we just say, yep, Jeremiah is autistic, and here are the celebrations we have, and here are the struggles we have. We're
Yeah.
not afraid to acknowledge and validate our own journey with him.
Mhm.
And I think that until parents learn to embrace that in that manner, that it's going to be that much harder for them to keep it all to themselves. Um, I have two things to say to your
Yeah.
idea of what you said about trusting professionals, right?
Mhm.
While I do believe that, yes, they are the professionals, it is still, like you said, the parent's job to trust their gut too,
Mhm.
because
Oh,
not
yeah.
all professionals are great or the
Right. Oh,
best
yeah.
fit, right?
Yep.
We had to go to two different therapy centers, and our very first one wasn't a good experience, and I was so
Mhm.
confused. I'm like, this is what speech is,
Yeah.
and I I we didn't have a good experience. We went for a month. We stopped,
Mhm.
and it wasn't until we got the so we've gone through a really non-traditional, like, autism journey, um,
Yeah.
and we got an unofficial diagnosis, and at our unofficial diagnosis, the nurse practitioner told us to go back. You need to take them back to speech, and you need to take them back to OT, and you're gonna try a different clinic because that's part
Yeah.
of therapy.
Okay.
So, I think that parents also need to understand, which is something I have to also still learn how to understand, is that it's okay to let go and find a new therapy,
Oh, yeah.
new
Of
therapist,
course.
like, if it doesn't work out, right?
Mhm.
Like, I struggle with change, and I struggle with when I find something really good and I have to let go of it, like, that's
Uh-huh.
even harder. But if I find something really bad, I also struggle because I'm like, "I worked so hard to make this work," you know? And then now you're gonna tell me I have to make changes again?
Yeah.
Um,
You're
and
like, "We just got
so
in the door. What's going on?"
yeah, so it's okay to trust your gut if you
Mhm.
feel that sorry, lo, you have to trust a professional, lo,
Mhm.
if you feel like it's not a good fit for your child,
Oh, yeah.
it's okay to find or continue advocating, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, and
and
to your
I
point,
yeah.
I will share, happily, this is not a plug, but it kinda is. If you follow me on, Instagram on my, business page, I shared a story, or a reel about my baby, when again, I go into the speech eval. I have my mom hat on because 'cause I'm like, I'm just a mom, I'm here as a mom. I go, and I sat in many, many speech evals before. I've worked with many, many amazing speech paths. And I was like, I'm curious to hear what they have to say, right? And I knew the speech eval was 45 minutes long. First 15 minutes, she's not talking to me. She's not explaining anything to me.
Yep.
She's watching him, but she's not really like telling me what she's seeing, what she's collecting, what she's looking for, what he's not doing. And then it's a lot of me talking to her. And then I was like, well, we've got 30 minutes left. I'm paying for this, so I'm gonna get the most out of this. And then so I go, hey, so I'm a behavior analyst and I just wanted to I have a few questions for you. Want to pick your brain? And then at the moment I told her that, Golly, her demeanor changed. She was like chit chatting with me about all the things. She's like
My
telling me
goodness.
all the assessment stuff, and this is what we're looking for. And I mean, yes, my baby has a speech delay, but she's like, and we want him to be here, but he's not because obviously, right? She's showing me stuff on her little thing. I'm going, what if I didn't say anything? What if I
Yeah.
had not said anything? Would she just let me go another 30 minutes? And then I walk out of there clueless, going, okay, I guess they'll call me, right? And I thought, as a Hmong person and as a BCBA, I thought, is that the experience that most Hmong parents go through?
Or
Most
families.
non-speak English speaking families go through? Or even English speaking families who don't know the questions to ask? Is this what they go through? Is that why they're so lost? Is that why they feel like these services are not needed because they're not truly good at a good explanation of what they're testing, what they're looking for? So even from day one, you can be like, ooh, I could try that at home. Are they explaining things to me in a way that I can understand even at any level you're at, right? Like they should always simplify, even if you're not a behavior analyst, even if you're not have no idea what they're talking about. There is a way to simplify things. And I was very frustrated and very frustrating
Yeah.
for
That
myself
is
and for
frustrating.
all other parents who didn't know the right questions to ask or who couldn't drop their credentials and then see that switch go off. And this is not to say that speech path didn't do a good job. She did her job the way she was trained. So it's a systematic issue, right? That speech she was very nice and kind, but I'm
Yeah.
like, but this is a long-term relationship. I don't know how long
Yes.
my kiddo will be in speech for, maybe 6 months, maybe 3 years. Do I want to deal with this every week? And so that was another factor that made it easier to kind of ease out of there, but you have to think about, yet if you just get that, listen to your mommy senses and you're like, this isn't a good fit, that's okay. I had someone reach out to me recently and said, "Hey, we don't love our BCBA." I said, "Ask for a new one. That's okay. It's not going to hurt her feelings because she wants you guys to be successful. Your BCBA is going to want your child to be successful, and that is okay." And so, like, I think
Yeah,
a lot of
I
parents don't recognize that you can ask for someone different, because at the end of the day, it's your child. And I always tell parents, unfortunately, after the fact, I'm like, hey, essentially, your kiddo is the one that's going to bear the brunt of this. Is,
and
like,
you
if
you
you as the
mentioned
parent don't do that.
you mentioned something that was important, which is
Mhm,
you put on your professional hat too.
mhm,
And when I went into my first speech and OT clinic, I didn't put on my teacher hat. I just had
mhm.
my mom. I didn't know any
Yeah,
better. This is our first time. And
sure.
you're right. That's what made our experience not good was that they didn't talk to me. I was
Mhm,
confused. I'm like, what are
mhm.
they doing? Um my husband and I took turns like alternating the appointments.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do 1 week, he'll do the
Oh,
other,
right.
and I was like, "When you go, do they talk to you?" Like, I get so sleepy. Like, I almost like, my goodness, like, I'm just sitting there. What am I supposed to do? Like,
Uh-huh.
but when we started with this new clinic and I it actually, when you were talking about how you brought up your credentials, I was like, "Dang, do they talk to me now because they know that I'm a teacher?" But then, like, I was like, "No, I didn't even share that I was a teacher, right?" But
Yeah,
they talked to me. They were
yeah.
like, "Here's what we're gonna do with your
Mhm,
son, and here's why we're doing this activity."
mhm,
And so, like, I didn't just see it as them playing. I started learning that, oh, this is an activity that is going to like, especially the OT. Like, she talked about like, oh, we have this like additional sense beyond our five senses. It's the sense, the proprial something
mhm.
something, if you're
Yeah,
familiar with what I'm talking about.
yes.
And she like explained all that to me, and so that in OT, um, our goal is to activate that, which is often something that is not heavily utilized with children who are autistic. And
Mhm.
so a part of our activities is to have him just, it almost looks like he's just exercising. Like,
Yeah.
he's literally running back and forth through the crash pad. He's going through the tunnel. But
Yeah.
she's told me that she was pairing a cognitive task with him going in between the tunnel.
Mhm.
And I kid you not, when we first went, the first month was the hardest because my
Yeah.
son would not move. He would not lift a muscle.
Oh,
She had
wow.
to she had to literally like
Do everything
shove
for him.
him through the tunnel. And then, like, he got so mad because he's like, "You made me go through all that, and then now you want me to read a flashcard to you?" Like, but right now, he won't stop moving. He's
Yeah.
jumping, he's doing everything, but, like,
Mhm.
that's the strides. Those
Yeah.
are the things that I wanna celebrate, is that, like,
Mhm.
we had to get over that hump
Mhm.
of him protesting and being upset, like, "Mom, what are you doing? Why are we here? Why am I going through this tunnel that I don't wanna
Yeah.
crawl through?" And now he just won't stop bouncing, you know?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised to hear that a year ago he didn't lift a muscle, and now he's
Mhm.
running around. And so that's how I see that OT has benefited him. But given that his OT tells me every step of the way,
Yeah.
talks to me, and that's not what I got at my first clinic. And I didn't know that that was
Mhm.
something that, like what you said, like they were interacting with you, but the moment you
Mhm.
shared your credentials, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, like,
Yeah.
and they should, like, the good therapist should be telling you,
Yeah.
should be explaining. And if they're
Yeah.
not, you're probably not, you should probably find somebody else. Mhm.
And that's not really the content of this episode, but it has become, because it's so important, that I think a lot of our parents, um, not just our Hmong parents, but Mika parents, Hispanic parents that I've worked with, they just appear complacent. They've been trained to just accept what is given, because a lot of times I hear, like "Lin chai jia yu ji," if you're not complacent, or as a parent, if you're not like,
Chỉ có
then
tự trả lời.
it's like, oh, no, no, no,
Mhm.
go find someone else that will do a better job. Or
Mhm.
maybe for some people this is as good as it gets and they're fine with it. But as a parent, man, you gotta advocate. You got to know. And but how would you know if this is not something that you're already like trained in, or you for you as a teacher, you're like, well, there's got to be a reason for the madness, right? But now finally someone's telling you
Yeah.
the reason for the madness. But like, what if your parent that like that's not your skill set to understand all that, and you need someone to really break it down for you, or even let you know that there's a science behind what we're doing. We're not just having a meaningless walk through, or run through a tunnel. There's a reason for it. And then you just say, well, they just said that to bring him here, and we're here. And it's like,
Yeah.
and then I was just talking to someone this morning. They said, yeah, we had him in therapy, but the parents were a little bit older. Young Hmong parents were a little bit older, and they were not seeing progress, so they pulled him out. And that happens too, right? Because yeah, if you're not invested in the treatment, and then it sucks, right? You get the other side where due to the whether it's a language barrier or cultural barrier, you don't understand that. Hey, they're waiting to see progress, and they're not seeing it. They're pulling them out, like they're done. They don't trust the system anymore. They don't trust you anymore. They're just done. And now, who suffers? The kiddo, right? Because the professionals didn't know to explain to the parents. The parents didn't know to ask professionals. Essentially, the one who loses is the kiddo, and so I hate that. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of educating on both sides, and so that's kind of
Yeah.
what
And
I hope to do with this is really help.
you're you're right that, like, this is not the content, but for me as an educator, like, that's why I think it's so important to continue to train professionals no matter who it is,
Oh yes.
what equitable work is. No matter what, even if there's a language barrier, you shouldn't let that be a barrier for
Mm-hmm.
you to continue to explain. Just because I show up as a
Sure.
teacher who might seem more competent with the questioning that I'm having, and then a
Mm-hmm.
Somali parent who has a translator there,
Mm-hmm.
you should be treating both families exactly the same.
Exactly.
And,
Yep.
like, you're right, like, bây giờ mong na so do lỡ lao đúng chị lỡ might associate us, especially since a lot of these providers are MEGA people, they might associate us with, like, "Oh, there goes another, like, person of color family, so we're just gonna keep treating this." But then we came with our credentials, we came with our, like, speaking the way that we do, that they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, okay." But then that's so unfair to a lot of families that don't,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, don't have that knowledge, that language
Mm-hmm.
to advocate for their child the same. And so
Yeah.
that's why I think equity work is so, so, so important.
It really is. And it's hard when you don't have, if you're not at a place in your life as a parent to advocate for yourself, and you don't know who to help step in to advocate for you. And then you go through the system, and it leads to eventual mistrust of the system, or feeling like they didn't do anything to help my kid anyway. And then, I hate saying that, where they feel like the system wasn't working for them. But it's like, well, did you do all that you could? Maybe you did. So we talk about equity, right? We're not there. We're not there with the world. And I hope that whatever this story does,
We need an entire podcast, different podcast about people of color professionals
yeah.
and the weight that we carry
Mm-hmm.
as people of color professionals, because we carry that lens of understanding that, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, like, we like you said, you wanted a coach, you wanted to provide them all the resources that they needed, and not every family come in with that knowledge. And so, but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
we'll save that.
Yeah, so no, I love it. It's been kind of a real hodgepodge, but I think that it really addresses all the things that we see in real life. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and just being so transparent, Golly, and just being willing to share, kind of the vulnerability that comes with, like you said, processing everything, and I think one of my friends who was on the show, she said, she was really depressed for about 2 weeks, and then she shifted gears and was like, what do we do? And even though we talk about, I think in one of my other episodes talking about like the mental health of caregivers, it is a little bit like the stages of grief, right? When you finally come to acceptance, it doesn't mean you're done. It doesn't mean you're out of the woods. You could go back, right? Depending on like the next life chapter, right? Once he becomes a teenager, an adult, or you can cycle through it again, and just being willing to just meet it, and just say, hey, this is okay. I'm a parent of this child that I love so much, that I brought into the world. And there's this example that I share a lot is tell you, Nulana, you're just like, you have all these hopes and dreams. And then, they get here, and sometimes a lot of they're developing neurotypically. And then it really, for a lot of the stories that I hear, it's just like there's just one day where it just stops, or it regresses, or it's very slow. But it's you remember it, like just like for you, you're like, at 4 months, we struggled to get him to smile, and that's when you knew, right? But I don't want you to see it as like a downhill battle. It's just a different one. It's just ups and downs, just like everyone else. And so, just being able to share your story and let others know, hey, you're not alone. And I think that's the most helpful part of this, because I think being on this journey is isolating enough. But then when we talk about it in the realm of like the Hmong community, because not enough people are talking about it. And I hope that, our conversation today will kind of like, open up a lot of different topics, like, oh, they're talking about this. We kind of went through that. I'm curious to know how other people dealt with it, right? Because it's just so easy just to feel like, nobody I can talk to. And because you always want to think that when you're going through something like this, like your nuclear family, you can share it with. But as it is, we're still at the point where, we're still trying to find a word for autism,
Yeah.
or how to explain it, how to describe it. And so thank you so much for just sharing your story with me today.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway here is knowing that, like what you said, that processing, grieving, whatever it is that you're going
Mhm.
through is part of the process.
Yes.
And I really hope that for the parents who really want to support their children, get past once they are ready to get past that, to then just get over that hump and meet their children where they're at in whatever way possible. So yeah.
Yeah, and I really love that phrase too. And I use it a lot too, like, meeting your child where they're at, because that's the only way you'll get any work done, really, any meaningful work,
Mm,
because otherwise it's just gonna be a struggle for them and for you. So meeting them where they're
mm.
at and then going from there. So thank you, Gully. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.